This is the strategy that I use to break down a full NFL game and find the best plays within that game. And I'm going to teach it to you right now. So you could literally do this strategy with any NFL game, or you could do it with all on any given Sunday. It's just going to take some time. But I'm going to go through and show you guys how you can break down that game and find the best plays within that game that's going to give you the best opportunity to win. So the first thing that we want to start at, we want to look at the lines. Okay, we got to look at the lines for the spread and the total here. So the game that we're going to use for an example is going to be the Detroit Lions, the Dallas Cowboys. So let's look at what the lines are when you open your sports book and you're able to see exactly what they are. Okay, so right now we got the spread, lines are -3, and then the total is 54. So these are the lines, like if you just literally open your sports book, this is what the general lines across the sportsbook industry really are right now. Now the first thing we want to do here is we want to identify where we're not going to waste any time. So where we're not going to waste any time is if there's not any line movement or there's really no trends, head-to-head trends that favor anything in this category. So first off, on the line movement here, the Lions actually opened up at -6 and have moved to -3. So that would put an indicator for us to look more into the Cowboys spread here. But when you go and look at their head-to-head trends for against the spread, okay, their head-to-head trends, you'll see in the last 10, they're 5-5, so they split it both ways. All right, so since they split it both ways, we don't really want to waste any time really looking at that. So we won't pay attention to the spread whatsoever. This is what you want to do in the first half of breaking the game down, because you want to know, you don't want to waste your time in certain areas that's going to amount to really nothing. So that's going to probably amount to nothing because of the trends being, 50-50 there. So let's take a look at the total now. The total in the last 10 has went over 7 out of the last 10 times. All right, so 70% of the time it's went over that total. Now this line opened up at 48 and has moved to 54, which giving us an indicator of there's a hefty amount of money being put on the over in this matchup that's moving the line. So what we want to do here is we want to look at this more in detail, the total, because we have a head-to-head trend that's favoring the over 70% of the time, and we have line movement that started at 48 and went up to 54. So we want to take a look at the over here in this. So that's the first thing we're going to take a look at, is going to be the over, and right now the current line is 54. So now we've established that the trends are there, the line movement's there. Let's take a look at the money and the bet percentage on how this is, fluctuating, because this line moved pretty hefty for the total. So let's go ahead and take a look at where that money and bet percentage looks like. So we'll put the bet percentage here, money percentage here. So right now, there's 54% of the bets coming in on the under. So this could possibly mean, again, a lot of small ticket parlays, single bets that are smaller, being put public-wise on the under in this matchup. The reason being is because total's so high that public gets scared when there's a high total and they think, oh, well, there's no way they're going to score that many points, So we'll start hammering. Listen, that's literally a concept that a lot of the public looks at. It's just the number and it's like, oh, that number's too big. So they'll start betting the under. But now let's take a look at the money percentage. Now the money percentage is actually 61% favoring the over here. So we have a pretty good opposite differential here. We got the public that's favoring the under, and we got the heavy money favoring the over here, which is where we want to be at. Okay, we always want to be where the money's going to be at. So where does that put us? That puts us at the over as well. So right now, everything looking good. All right, we got the line movement, we got the trends, we got the money bet percentage lining up. So everything's looking good for the over for so far. Now we need to look a little bit more in detail now to further analyze if we have a great shot at the over here and to get our projected score of what we think is actually going to happen based off of certain numbers. Now, if you guys want all my other strategies that I teach in every major sport, make sure you guys go and click the link down in the description, where I also send you all the plays that follow the criteria that I teach. So we're looking at the over 54 right now. Now, what stats do we need to look for within to be able to find if we actually can make a play on this and if it'll be an actual favorable matchup and give us a higher probability? All right, so first thing I like to look at is both the teams. We're gonna write those down, okay? Dallas, Detroit. Both teams plays per game. How fast do they play? Do they run a lot of plays? So let's take a look at that first off. Detroit runs 61.8 plays per game. Dallas runs 64.8 plays per game. Okay, write that down. plays per game. Now, why this is important for a total, because like I said, you want in an over, you want fast pace. You want, possessions to keep flipping, so it gives the other team opportunities to score, as many opportunities to score as possible. So here we're looking at two decently fast-paced teams in the NFL. This is actually pretty high for both teams. Next thing we want to look at is points play. Now this shows how efficient the offenses and defenses are when it comes to scoring. So this is very crucial. This is a stat that not a lot of people even look at when looking at totals. Okay, points per play. So let's go ahead and list that down here, because this is how we're going to be able to get our projection of what the score should be if they play up to what they average. So Dallas on offense, 0.45 points per play, and they give up on defense the exact same. Detroit on offense, a little bit better, 0.47, but a little bit better on defense as well, where they only give up 0.37 points per play. Now what you want to do here to get the equation of the projected score is you want to be able to take the plays per game, multiply that by points per play on offense and defense, and then you'll get the projected score on both ends. Okay, so let's take Dallas for example here at 64.8. 64.8 times 0.45, we're going to put this over here for projected score. Dallas, Detroit. All right, so if we multiply that, we're going to get 29.16 on the offensive end. Now the defensive end, again, we're going to take the plays per game, and then we multiply that by Detroit's defense of what they allow. So you would take 64.8, multiply that by 0.37. And that gives us 23.97, so almost 24 there. Now let's do the same thing with Detroit. We take 61.8 and we'd multiply that by 0.47. That would give us 29.04. And then on the defensive end, we take Detroit's plays per game and Dallas's defensively points per play. And that's going to give us 27.81. So now once you have this, what we're going to do here is we're going to add both of these together and then you divide it by 2 to get your projected score. All right, so we're going to put our projection right here. So that projected score puts us at Detroit at 28.42 and then Dallas at 26.56. Now what we do here is we're going to add both of those together. Now when you add both of those together, you get a projected total score of 54.98 points. So almost 55 points. Where, look at where this brings us here, okay? 55 points, look at what the total has moved to, 54 points. So right on line to where they've moved the total now, because you see where I showed you guys the line movement started at 48, now it's at 54. Well, it completely moved across now to where the exact projected score should be. We still got an extra point here because actually we're at 55. That's pretty much 55 points. The line is still at 54. So projected score-wise, we're still sitting pretty good. So now for the total, since we have all this, pretty much planned out here, we got our projected total of 55 points, we're gonna call it, okay? So projected total 55. Now we gotta look at what number to analyze here. Reason why is because there's key numbers that are involved when it comes to totals and spreads. So let's write those key numbers down. So that would be 47, 50, 51, and 55. Now as you can see, we fall on a key number here for our projected total, which is 55. All right, the number right now is at 54. So that is where you'd want to be if you were on the over. You'd want to be on 54 here, okay, because you are actually below that one key number. Now to play it even more safe, now if you wanted to be under this projected total, way under it, and you want to play it completely safe in this matchup, what you can do is you could take it back to either 49.5 or 46.5. Okay, so you could literally play this matchup, the over here, at 46.5, 49.5, or you can go where it's at right now at 54. Okay, because you still are safe under that key number of 55 where the line is currently at. I don't like necessarily giving the line that the sportsbook has at the current moment. The reason being is because stuff can happen in a game where it literally comes down to one possession or whatnot, whereas if you took a smaller line, you're easily going to win, rather than the line that everybody got comes down to one possession, everybody knows what happens, last minute or something like that, that doesn't end up happening. So I always take the safer route. So I always go in this range here, I never, never take exactly what the sportsbook's going to give me. I make my own line. I do not play what they want to give me. That's just not how it works for me. And that's where the success comes from. So just make sure that you understand how important it is to make your own line as well. Even though we've made our own line and our line projects at 55, still, you never want to be where the sportsbook is putting you at. Now that we broke down the total, let's break down the player props within the game and find where those best player props are going to be at. So to be able to define the player props, what we first want to do here is we want to identify how these offenses play. So first thing we want to look at here is going to be pass play percentage. So how often do these teams pass the ball? So we're going to go ahead and put it down, Dallas and Detroit. Now Dallas is 7th in pass play percentage. Detroit is 19th. What this shows is Dallas definitely likes to throw the ball, that's for sure. And Detroit, about even there, okay? Detroit, really how they play is whatever's working, that's what they end up rolling with. If the running game works, they'll just hammer the run game. If the run game isn't working, they'll just hammer the passing game. So that's kind of how Detroit's offense works. As in Dallas, they kind of just throw the ball because their defense is so bad that they're always playing from behind most of the time anyway. Now let's take a look at rush play percent. Now obviously, if Dallas is pretty good in the pass play percentage here, they're probably not going to be too good in the rush play percentage, but we'll take a look. And they are 26th in rush play percentage, and Detroit is 14th. So again, like I said, Detroit's offense here, you could just tell by these even numbers where they're at, that whatever works in the game for them, that's what they hammer. They don't just force something. They don't just force the pass or force the rush. Dallas, they're more leaning towards the pass game here, okay? They're not looking really to run the ball as much. So what we could take out of play for looking at props is any running backs for Dallas. We don't need to pay attention to that. But passing-wise, we have to look at Dak Prescott, Jared Goff, and then also the rushing here that we're going to have to look at for Detroit, which is going to be Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, first thing we want to look at here, if we're going to look at Goff and we're going to look at Prescott, is we have to look at how the defense allows yards per completion. This is very important for passing plays because this is how you're going to get your projection for how many passing yards that they're going to actually throw for. So yards per completion, let's go ahead and write that down. Yards per completion, let's look at Dallas and let's look at Detroit. Now Dallas is 28th, okay, one of the worst. They give 10.7 yards per completion. Surprisingly, Detroit is even worse. They're 29th, and they give up 11 yards per completion. So now that we got our yards per completion written down here, and we see that both these teams are absolutely terrible in that department, what we're going to do to get our projection for Goff and Prescott's passing yards is we need to take what they average on the season, okay? So each game, how many completions do they average here? So Goff, he averages 22 completions per game across the season, and Prescott, he averages a little bit over 25. So now what you do is you take that and you multiply it by the defense yards per completion here. So we take Goff at 22 and we multiply that at 10.7. That would give us a projection for Goff at 235 yards. Now we do the same with Prescott here. Okay, Prescott, we would go 25, we'd multiply that by 11, and that would give us 275 for a projection on Dak Prescott. Now that we have those projections there, we're going to write them down once more. We have to go through the lines and see which line actually gives us the highest probability and the highest edge actually. All right, so Goff was 235 and Prescott was 275. Now let's take a look at the lines and compare our implied probability versus our true probability and exactly where our edge lies. So for Goff, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put down his 200 line, 225, 240, and 250. Now let's first find out what our implied probability here, because we can find that by just putting the odds down. So at 200, it's 440, 225, it's 235. 240 is minus 157, and then 250 is minus 108. So let's find our implied probability now based off of these odds. For 200, we got 82%. For 225, 70%. 61% for 157, and then 52% at 108. So this is our implied probability here, okay? Across the board, that's our implied probability. Now we need to find the true probability with those percentages and see which line gives us the highest edge, and that's the line we're going to end up playing. So let's mark our true probability right here. So at 200, Goff is 92% true probability. At 225, he is 75%. 240, he's 67%. And at 250, he is 58%. So let's take a look at where does our edge actually have the highest opportunity. So at 250, we got a 6% edge. 240, we got a 6% edge again. 225, we're going down now. Now we got a 5% edge. But then at 200, at the line, look, at minus 440, okay? Which might scare a lot of people, obviously, right? Because it's a higher odds. You actually have the biggest advantage here. You have a 10% edge at this number right here. This is why I try to tell you guys, sometimes it plays out like this, to where the higher odds will give you a massive advantage compared to other numbers. So right here, based off of percentage and probability, our line for Goff to get 200 plus gives us a 10% edge. So that's where we would be lying for Jared Goff, right? We'd be lying right there, because why would we take any percentage that's even lower just because we want better odds? But guess what? Your edge goes down, actually. And I'm going to show you guys when we take a look at Jahmyr Gibbs how it plays out too, because it doesn't always play out just like this, all right? But now we've got Goff down. Let's look at Prescott, because now we need to analyze Dak Prescott here and see where his line lies and where we could be at. Again, we had our projection here at 235. We got him at 200 plus. This should be a no-brainer. Should be like they left money sitting on the floor. All right, as long as he doesn't get hurt, should be money in the bank. That's how it should work. Now, let's take a look at Prescott. So for Prescott here, we're going to go 200, 225, 250, and 260. And we're going to do the same exact thing here. Let's find our percentages with our odds. 200 is 575, 225 is 285, 250 is minus 150, and 260 is minus 120. So let's find our implied probability here. So our implied probability here is going to be 85%, and then for 225, 74%. For 250 is going to be 60%, and then 260 is going to be 54%. Now, let's get our true probability here. True probability here is 83%. For 225, it is also 83%. Now let's look at 250. 250 is 75%, and 260 is 58%. So if we take a look at these numbers now, what do we got here? So at our lowest line at 200, we have a negative 2%. So like I just said, the higher the odds don't always necessarily mean you have a better shot at winning and you got an edge. Proven right here, as in you actually have a negative 2% edge for Prescott at 200 passing yards, which he'll probably pass that, but it's just, the thing is long term, you get a negative edge, you're going to eventually lose that. You're going to lose money at those type of odds with a negative edge. Now 225, we got a 9% edge here, so pretty good there at 225. But let's take a look at this. The 150 line at 250 passing yards creates a 15% edge here. So actually our best edge is actually in somewhere in the middle here, where it's 250. And our odds actually aren't that bad. So Prescott, we got here at 250, giving us a plus 15% edge. Now you see, this is why you have to be able to break stuff down, because just because the odds are higher and the probability, implied probability is higher, does not necessarily mean there's an edge there. Because I see a lot of people saying in the comments sometimes when they look at games, and they're like, oh, minus 500 loses all the time. Well, they do, because if you have a negative edge on that play, you're going to lose long term betting that type of play. But if you have a positive edge, you're going to make money, okay? It's all about situational matchups and how to be able to identify where to put this stuff at. So again, Goff 200 plus gives us 10% edge. Prescott 250 gives us a 15% edge there. Now let's go ahead and take a look at Detroit Lions running back Jahmyr Gibbs. So now let's go ahead and take a look at Jahmyr Gibbs here. The reason why we're going to do that is because we've already established that Dallas, they can't stop the run either. Okay, and we've established that on offense, Detroit will lean either way here. Whatever's working is where they'll lean heavy. So let's take a look at Jahmyr Gibbs. What we want to look at is Dallas's defense yards per carry. All right, don't get that mixed up with yards per completion, but because it's the same looking way. But this is yards per carry, okay? Or you could use yards per attempt, same stuff. So Dallas allows 4.7 yards per carry, okay, which is pretty much bottom of the league. All right, they're not too good at stopping the run here. So what we're going to do here is now we're going to take Jahmyr Gibbs' average carries per game, and we're going to multiply that by the yards per carry. So he averages about 14.5 carries per game. So we take that, multiply that by the yards per carry. That's going to give us our projection here of about 68 yards rushing for Jahmyr Gibbs. But now let's go ahead and break it down and see exactly where the edge lies compared to the lines that are across the board. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go with 50, 60, 70, and 80. Those are going to be our yardages. Again, we're going to do implied and true probability. Let's see where our edge lies. So the 50, this line is 480. 60, this is 263. 70, it's minus 160, and at 80, it's minus 137. So let's get our percentages here. Our implied percentage is going to be 85% at 50, 72% at 263, 61% at 70, and 58% at 137. All right, now let's find his true probability to reach each of these numbers. So let's start with 50. 50, we got 75%. 60, we got 67%. 70, we got 42%. And then at 80, we got the same, 42% here. So if we go and look at this now, we got at 80 yards, a negative 16% edge. At 70 yards, a negative 19% edge. At 60 yards, a negative 5% edge. And at 50 yards, a negative 10% edge. So we actually have a negative edge across the board for Jahmyr Gibbs. Okay, so what we would do here is we would obviously just take this off. All right, we can't look at that because now we have negative edge across the board. Yes, he might be able to get 50 or 60 rushing yards. We have a projection at 68 here, but the numbers just don't line up for an edge long-term wise. All right, so it just doesn't line up. When things don't line up like that, you don't get an edge anywhere with correlating with what the odds are. Then you're just gonna bypass it completely. So what we're focusing on here, obviously, is looking like the total is what you would find within this game. After we've broken down this entire game, and like I said, you can do this with any game in the NFL. Any game you can break down just like how I just showed you. And what we've got from this game is we got the total, we got an over that we're looking at, and then we got two QBs that we have passing yards totals that we're looking at also. So that's what we were able to depict from this game. Like I said, when you break down a full game, you find the best plays within the game. And it's not going to be every single prop that's out there, but that's how you find the best props within the game, and you break down a full NFL game to give yourself an advantage.